Susan Saladoff is a former attorney and the director of the documentary Hot Coffee. Susan, it's great to talk to you. I want first for you to tell us a little bit about how we have seen over the last, I don't even know how many years, this idea that tort reform is objectively something that is good for the individual, and how it's actually been used politically by those on both sides, the Republicans and Democrats, to convince people that tort reform is something they need that will make their lives better, and how that may not be true.
Well, so much money has been spent by large corporate interests through the media to convince the public that our court system is broken. Because if people think that the court system, our civil courts, are not working and that there are too many frivolous lawsuits, jackpot justice, lawsuit lottery, then people are willing to reform it, which has become this sort of term of art, reform, as if it's something good for us. When in fact, in this particular case, reform means we give up our rights as average citizens and corporations get to make more money. Because the only place that we have to hold wrongdoers accountable is in the civil courts. And particularly large corporations, when they make products that harm us, when they dump pollution into our streams, the only place that average citizens can say, no, this isn't right, and you have to compensate us for the harm that you've done to us, is in our court system. And the corporations figured that out. In fact, Karl Rove was really the mastermind behind this years ago when when President Bush was running to be governor of Texas. And he realized that he could galvanize money from all over the country into Texas if corporations can limit their liability in the court system.
Right. It's one of those things kind of like tax relief. Well, if less taxes relieves you, then always less taxes must be good. It's kind of the same thing that we're seeing with the term reform. Let's talk about this frivolous lawsuit thing, though, because I saw you on the Stephen Colbert Show, and he, in a very funny way, kind of addressed this issue of are there or are there not frivolous lawsuits. And I know you say a lot of lawsuits that are considered frivolous really aren't. And an example from the movie is the McDonald's hot coffee incident. Tell us a little bit about that first, but also, are there frivolous lawsuits in your opinion?
So, of course, everybody wants to talk about the words frivolous lawsuit because those words have been fed to us time and time again through television commercials, media ads, print, all of this. It's been repeated so many times that it sort of flows off of our tongues. Most people think that the McDonald's coffee case, the woman who spilled coffee and sued McDonald's, was the most ridiculous or frivolous lawsuit until they see the film Hot Coffee. And then after they see my film, I ask people, the audiences all the time at the Q&As, how many of you knew about this case before you walked in the door? Everybody raises their hand. How many of you thought it was frivolous or ridiculous? Everybody raises their hand. And then afterwards I say, how many now think that? And nobody raises their hand, because once people see the actual facts and what really happened, then they don't think it was so ridiculous or frivolous.
Yeah, explain the facts, though, for people who don't know.
Yeah. So most people think, oh, this woman was driving the car, she spilled coffee on herself, she wasn't very injured, and she won millions of dollars. So what really happened is this was a 79-year-old woman. She had never brought a lawsuit a day in her life. She was a passenger in a parked car. Her grandson was driving. They ordered a cup of coffee through the drive-thru, and this was in 1992. It's not like the kinds of cups we have now. This was one of those old styrofoam cups with the little flat plastic on the top that you could never open that triangular thing. And the styrofoam, by the way, really holds the heat of the coffee. And McDonald's was selling the coffee through the drive-thru at 180 to 190 degrees. And the reason we know that is because they had a policy or a manual that required them to do that. And coffee at that temperature causes third-degree burns, which are the worst kinds of burns that you can have, within 3 to 7 seconds of contact. So they sold this coffee through the drive-thru, but they put it in a bag and they put the cream and sugar in the bag. So her grandson pulled into a parking spot. She tried to open that little top to put the cream and sugar in. Actually, she steadied it between her knees on the seat because there weren't any cup holders or flat surfaces in the car. And when she couldn't get that little top off, she opened it, and the coffee was so hot, the cup literally collapsed, and the coffee pooled in her crotch because it was a bucket seat. And it caused her so severe burns that she had to have skin grafting, skin taken from her thighs and sewn inside of her. She was in the hospital for a week, and then she was incapacitated for almost 2 years. And all she asked for was the difference between what Medicare paid and what her medical bills were. And McDonald's, although they had paid out over 700 times for people who had been burned by their coffee, they offered her $800 and they never offered her another penny. And the jury was unanimous and they awarded her 2 days of coffee sales for McDonald's, which turned out to be a large sum. It was 2.7 million at the time. And then the judge reduced the amount to 480,000. But she was subject to a gag order and McDonald's wasn't, so she couldn't speak about what really happened. And the media and McDonald's and the tort reform groups, they all got hold of that case and just blasted it out as being one of these ridiculous cases. And then, of course, Seinfeld did an episode on it,
Right.
and Letterman and all that became the joke.
So let's talk a little bit about that term frivolous. Let's skip the term frivolous for a second, and let me just ask you kind of, colloquially, do you think that there are lawsuits that are brought that don't have merit, and certainly those can be dismissed, right? So there is legal recourse to say, well, actually, you don't deserve money. But do you think it's actually a problem where there are so many of these meritless lawsuits being brought that are being paid for? Is that even a problem?
It's not. It's not. In fact, the number of lawsuits and the kinds of lawsuits that I'm talking about in this movie are usually personal injury lawsuits, injury cases where people have been severely injured or injured in some way, and then they're trying to get compensation from the person or the company that harmed them. And so in those types of cases, first of all, we can't stop an individual person from bringing a lawsuit. I mean, that's part of our democracy. We have that as part of our Constitution. The question is that person going to find a lawyer? And is that person who brings a non-meritorious case going to get a verdict from a jury and then hold the verdict from a judge? And so, anybody who's walking down the street and who trips over their own feet, they can wind up bringing a lawsuit and filing it. But it costs money to do that, first of all. And the lawyers who represent people who are injured, they only get paid if they win. So it's very unlikely that a lawyer is going to bring very many cases that are non-meritorious because insurance companies aren't throwing money at non-meritorious cases and juries aren't giving verdicts to non-meritorious cases. So, but even if a person were to bring a case like this, and even if a lawyer were to represent that person, does the system have checks and balances in it that will prevent a person from getting a verdict in a so-called frivolous lawsuit? And the answer is absolutely yes. First, the judge can throw it out and fine the person if, in fact, it's non-meritorious, so that if the person who's being sued says this is a frivolous lawsuit, they go to the judge and say, Judge, this is a frivolous lawsuit, and then the judge evaluates it and decides whether it is or it isn't, and then decides whether that person can move forward. And then if the judge even makes a mistake or says, yes, you can go forward, now you've got 12 people sitting on a jury. They listen to both sides of the argument and both sides of the case, and then they come up with a verdict. In most states, it's a unanimous verdict. If it's not unanimous, it's like, 9 out of 12 or something. But even if the jury gets it wrong and they give a verdict for a frivolous, so-called frivolous case, which by definition, it can't really be frivolous if they've given a verdict and have evaluated it. But then let's say that they do, then the judge can reduce it like that happened in the McDonald's case. And then even if it gets past the judge, now there are 2 appeals, one after the other. And so the chances of there being a verdict or a large amount of money that someone gets for a non-meritorious case is very unlikely. And in fact, these types of cases, the number of cases that have been brought in the last 10 years, they've declined by 25%.
Fascinating. Well, I really recommend the documentary Hot Coffee. We've been speaking with Susan Saladoff, who's a former attorney and the director of Hot Coffee. Really fascinating work. Thanks so much for talking to us, Susan.
Thanks. Can you let people know where they can get it?
Absolutely. Tell us.
So that you can, if you go to our website, which is hotcoffeethemovie.com, there's a trailer, and also the DVD can be ordered there. But also, it's on HBO Go, which is like if you download the app for HBO, you can stream it on HBO. You can get it on Netflix, but it's the DVD. Or you can buy a copy of it from our website or off of Amazon. So please take a look at the trailer, and hopefully you'll see it. And most people say it's eye-opening, that it will really change your perception about the civil justice system.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you, David. Bye-bye.